Methods for solving quadratic equations. We have a couple different methods that we've done in this chapter, and we're going to go over when to use each one. We have factoring, we have graphing, square roots, completing the square, and then last but not least, the quadratic formula. So factoring, if you remember, is when you can do something like x minus p times x minus q equals 0, and then you use the zero product property. So you would have solutions of x equals p and x equals q. You use factoring when it's easily factorable. Okay, so if you can look at something and go, oh, okay, I know something that multiplies to this and adds to that, and I could really easily do this, and then use the zero product property. If you could do that, use factoring. Now, I'm going to jump down to square roots. Square roots, when no b value. So your equation is going to have to be ax squared plus c equals 0, because you would subtract the c, divide by whatever a is, then take a square root. If there's a b value in there, that's not going to work. Completing the square. Remember, completing the square is plus blank minus blank? Well, remember when you complete the square, first of all, the leading coefficient, positive 1. If the leading coefficient is not positive 1, either A, you cannot complete the square, or B, it's going to be too difficult to make the leading coefficient 1, so you shouldn't. Okay, so if it doesn't have a leading coefficient of positive 1, don't complete the square, pick something else. And then the other thing to look for is that the B value is even. And the reason you want the B value to be even is because you have to cut it in half. Remember, you cut it in half and then you square it? I don't want to have to cut 7 in half and then square it. That's disgusting. So if your leading coefficient is positive 1, your B value is even, then you can complete the square. Graphing. Graphing you can use almost any time. Almost any time. But solutions must be real. Okay, we have not covered imaginary solutions yet, so at the moment we don't really have to worry about it. If you're graphing and your solutions are imaginary or they don't exist, then the graph is not going to hit the x-axis and a graph will not help you with that. Okay, the other would be consider rounding. If your teacher asks you for an exact answer, let's say the answer is 5 plus the square root of 2. A graph is not going to tell you that. A graph is going to tell you 5.467. So if I specifically say I want an exact answer and not a rounded answer, a graph is probably not going to do that for you unless the answer is 2 or 7. So make sure you're considering what the teacher is asking for. And then last but not least, you have the quadratic formula. And for the quadratic formula, I'm going to say when all else fails. The quadratic formula will work every time on any quadratic equation. So if you go through all of your other options and it's not working, then you could just jump to the quadratic formula and use that. Now, that being said, you should not be using the quadratic formula for everything just because you know it works. It has a lot of variables, it has a lot of numbers, it has a lot of algebra, and honestly, if you can solve by square root, that's way easier. If you can solve by factoring, that's way easier than plugging everything into the quadratic formula. So practice all of them, read the directions, do what the directions say, because you need to have all of these kind of in your handbag or in your bag of tricks so that you can use them when they're needed.